Thank you, Maria. Hello, everyone. My name is Dion. I'm a senior reporter here at Argus who covers the sulfur and sulfuric acid markets, particularly in Asia. Today, I'll talk a little bit about Indonesia's role in the global sulfur and sulfuric acid markets, particularly from a fertilizer markets perspective. First of all, let me explain how Indonesia fits into all of this. So Indonesia holds 22% of the world's nickel reserves. However, the Indonesian government fully banned the nickel ore exports from January 2020 in a bid to sort of encourage refined nickel output. Most of the Indonesia's nickel ore is now used for processing to make battery materials like mixed hydroxide precipitate, known as MHP or nickel sulfate. These products are produced through the high pressure acid leaching process, also known as the HPAL process. So this HPAL process requires sulfuric acid, and Indonesia usually obtains it through importing it directly or through burning sulfur through sulfur burners. On the right of the slide, you can see a forecast that we have from our Argus Sulfur Analytics report showing upcoming sulfur demand expected just from the HPAL operations. However, in Indonesia, we expect projects like PT Aman and Freeport to add an additional 2.4 million tons a year of sulfuric acid production when at capacity. These two smelters are already running as of today in 2025, and we expect them to continue to increase operating rates and supply the domestic market. The difference here is that because of the proximity of the smelters to key buyers like Petrokimia Gresik or PIM, this will likely decrease the import appetite they will have for sulfuric acid in the coming months in the very short term up to 1 to 2 years. We are aware that supply contracts have already been signed with these smelters and key buyers, so we would expect the imports of sulfuric acid to decrease into Indonesia in the coming years. We also expect that higher sulfur burning capacity in Morowali and Wida Bay from the HPAL companies would also decrease import appetite into Indonesia. On the right of the slide, we see a table that illustrates of the kind of smelter capacity from now up to 2030 that we expect it to come online in Indonesia. However, sulfur demand continues to grow, mostly because of upcoming sulfur burners and HPAL projects. To illustrate this, we can see that last year's imports totaled around 3.62 million tons, which was 36% higher than the year before, whereas sulfuric acid imports were mostly stable at around 1.08 million tons in 2024. So we expect upcoming projects to demand at least 60 million tons a year of sulfuric acid, mainly from Tsingshan's Wida Bay and QMB Phase 3 projects. However, these will mostly come from sulfur burners, so which means that this demand has to be converted to around 5.3 million tons of sulfur per year of sulfur demand. Furthermore, we expect an increase in sulfur burning activity that's already in place that would decrease the sulfuric acid demand going into Indonesia. For example, this year we saw PTQMB New Energy Materials starting a new sulfur burner that produces around 660,000 tons a year of sulfuric acid. And they are expected to start another 1 million ton per year burner by the end of the year. Additionally, we also expect Tsingshan to start at least two sulfur burners across Wida Bay and Morowali, adding an additional 1.2 million tons a year of sulfur demand. This is equivalent to around 3.6 million tons of sulfuric acid demand. We can see a chart here showing our prices for both sulfur and sulfuric acid, and you can see that in recent months, especially from February, the gap between both prices started to widen. Over here, we have another chart where we compare these sulfur prices versus sulfuric acid prices using a formula here. The $15 credit there refers to sort of a steam credit, the kind of steam credits that buyers can get from burning sulfur, because sulfur burners produce steam, which is then used for power generation in the plant. Actually, sulfur prices have rose significantly over the past year, but now, as the chart illustrates, it still remains a more economical option now compared to sulfuric acid. The additional caveat is that sulfuric acid is also more tedious to handle and store, as opposed to granular sulfur that is handled in bulk. Sulfuric acid needs to be moved in chemical tankers and also stored in stainless steel tanks. And also tightening Indonesian regulations on import standards this year has also made it very difficult for importers to obtain import licenses. These import licenses also have to be purchased, which means that this will be additional costs that have to be borne by the buyers in Indonesia. This is a very quick market update that I've put together. For of course, any further information, please let me know, and I can be contacted on the details on the slide here. Now, pass over the time now to my colleague Xie Fang, who will talk a bit more about the Chinese market. Thank you.